I'm Kate Chaplinsky for the HAN Network, and as part of our 2017 candidate conversations, I'm joined today by Michael Redgate, who's an unaffiliated candidate running for First Selectman in Trumbull. Michael, so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Michael, you're a local business manager, also a volunteer. You work with Trumbull Rotary, you've in the past volunteered with Trumbull Lakewood YMCA, but you have not run for office in the past.
No, I have not.
Why did you decide to throw your hat in the ring as an unaffiliated candidate in a town with a strong two-party system?
People have asked me to get involved for a very long time. It started about 15 years ago, and wasn't really interested in doing it then because my children were little. Talked about it again maybe 7 years ago, and my children were in middle school, which is a difficult time for them already.
Right.
And then about 3 years ago, when Tim Herbst decided to run for state treasurer, I had a feeling that he was considering higher office, so I started to research it pretty heavily. And the research proved that unaffiliated registered voters, there are as many of them as there are Democrats and Republicans put together almost, and they don't have any representation. And also about 50% of our population doesn't vote. So maybe they felt that they weren't represented. So that's why I decided to get into it.
Now, you've mentioned that you think for a town of Trumbull's size, the budget's too big. So where would you look to either cut or find new revenue? Where could we go for that?
Well, in speaking with most of our residents that I met with, the general concern is that we don't raise taxes. And then I met with a group of teachers who said they didn't want to lose jobs, and a lot of residents that feel the same way. So I think that in the school system, there's an opportunity for fundraising. I know that Jane Ryan just had a very successful walkathon. They used to sell gift wrap, and I think they tripled their contributions at least, so that's an avenue we can look at. There are also some ways we could cut that wouldn't affect teachers' jobs or the effect it has on our students, but that's something that should be taken through each school. And the last thing I think is very important would be commercial growth. Commercial growth is a long-term plan, but it could certainly offset the state cuts coming in if we continually move forward in that, with that progress.
And how would you mitigate kind of uncertain state funding for Trumbull?
Well, we're not sure right now what's going to happen. I'm hoping that the education cuts don't come through, but it's going to be difficult. The budget really has to be looked at line by line, and we have to look at ways not cutting services that affect our residents, because taxes are difficult as it is, and a lot of people rely on those services. We have a senior population that's growing, and we do spend $100 million on education, so we should take care of our seniors as well.
Now, your slogan for this campaign has been One Trumbull. Yes. Why do you think Trumbull is divided right now?
People tell me that. In meeting with individual residents, everyone seems to love Trumbull, but there is a concern that the two parties are not being productive, because even though they say they're willing to work across the aisle, a lot of the candidates or elected officials do vote party line. Sometimes the whole party agrees with the other party. So it's not really going across the aisle, it's more everyone agreeing on a certain situation. So I think that if we have more compromise, more conversation, get people involved that want to help our community, it's important. But then also when we elect those people, we should be electing the people that are best for Trumbull rather than the ones that we feel are doing their party agenda.
Now, as you mentioned earlier, there's no incumbent in this race. So how would you see your administration being different, if at all, from the current one, and how so? As
I mentioned, the candidates are the key. As an unaffiliated candidate, I can't have my own ticket. Anyone who would like to run on the unaffiliated line can do so as long as they go through the proper steps, which is getting signatures, raising your own funds, no party donations, no corporate donations, and also doing your own accounting. So what I've done in the last 5 months is I've met with as many candidates who are willing to meet with me. Some I still will meet with in the next couple of weeks. But they all are smart, they all are independent thinkers, and they do want to put Trumbull first and would be willing to work with me, and I'd be willing to work with them, which is great. I never doubted it, because when you meet with somebody one-on-one, it's totally different than what you may read in the newspaper or what you may see on social media, because when you're dealing with groups, it's different than dealing person to person. So
And now let's talk about council districts. Do you have an opinion on how many town council districts there should be in town? This has been a hot issue recently.
When I was first asked the question, I said 5.5 because one side wants 4 and the other side wants 7. My issue right now is that I feel after we did a poll 2 years ago that people are not voting because top 2 answers were no ideal candidate for me, and that the political party system was not being productive and people were turning away from the system in general. So being an unaffiliated candidate, I'm hoping to handle the first issue, which would be no proper representation. A lot of people I talk to also feel that they were tired of voting against someone rather than for someone, which to me makes sense because in the last presidential election I did hear that a lot, is why people voted the way they did. It wasn't necessarily a vote for, it was for a vote against. I spoke with the chairwoman of the Citizens for 7 districts. We had agree to disagree that she thinks people didn't vote because the lines were too long. I did polling that said it was more who the candidates were. As an unaffiliated candidate, the best thing for me would be strong voter turnout and also a more equally balanced town council. So if the Citizens for 7 districts came forward and said they were looking for more minority representation, I would be all for that because I think our council would work better with more representation from each party.
And now another big topic recently has been the community center, senior center. What's your take on that?
When I first met with Tim Herbst about the senior center, community center, I was interested because I love the concept. But what I told him was, please don't sell me a building. I need to know what value it's going to add to our town and how the cost of operating the senior community center would actually impact our taxes. I'm the pool guy in town. I've been running the Pisces swim team for the last 6 years. The coach that we hired is now the high school boys and girls coach. So I know a lot about pools. I've been to several build-a-pool seminars, and I discussed with him the importance of when you build a town pool, it must generate revenue to offset the operating costs. And I feel the same way about what we put into our community center. So really, I am caught between the value it's going to add and the impact on the taxpayer. What I would like to see is that value put forth, the actual operating costs for $300,000 home, $400,000 home, $500,000 home, so people can make the decision based on the information rather than just their feeling about the concept.
And finally, any other issue or topic we haven't hit on that you want to address if elected to office?
Misinformation about commercial growth, I think, is very important. I have had an opportunity in the last couple of months to meet with some of our top commercial developers. I met with Bob Cinto, I met with Sal, Pete, and Lenny DiNardo. I met with Phil DeGennaro, and I met with the Julian brothers. And they all talk about the struggles with commercial growth in Trumbull. There's we need to review more in planning and zoning to begin with because sometimes projects are important for commercial growth, but we have to consider the impact they have on the neighbors, which would be some parking or traffic situations. We also, there's a lot of talk about mixed use, but a lot of the commercial developers can't do that, for example, in Trumbull Center because there's an issue with the footings. There's an issue with having residents in Trumbull Center when there's plowing. There's enough parking there for any businesses, but when you add commercial residents, it becomes a different factor. So I think people should meet more with the people making the decisions for each development and get the facts before they start talking about their vision or what they think is best for Trumbull. And most of them said that they have broker fees. So if anybody wants to put a business forward that they could consider, it might be good for them.
All right. Well, Michael Redgate, unaffiliated candidate for First Selectman of Trumbull, thank you so much for talking with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you next time for our 2017 Candidate Conversations.